Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Smith. I'm joining you from New Orleans, Louisiana. Just wanted to welcome you all to the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. Just to remind everybody, this Buddhist Recovery Network, it is a labor of love. It's generosity in action. And our teachers around the world offer these wisdom teachings to help us in our recovery efforts. And they do so just from their heart. And so I'd like to offer this opportunity to give Donna at any point during our program or after the program. We do rely on Donna in order to make this academy run. And the Donna is shared between the teacher and the Buddhist Recovery Network for its programs. So just to, let's see if I can put this link in chat for you quickly. It is very simple. It's BuddhistRecovery.org donate. And what we ask that you do is to click the checkbox for the Academy so that we know that you'd like to support this particular program. So without, let's see, I think I'd like to introduce Mary now. Mary Stankovich is our guest teacher today. She'll be offering a teaching, a talk called Moving into Spaciousness. So Mary has practiced meditation yoga and cultivated her spiritual practice for over 30 years. And in 2009, she was empowered to teach Buddha Dharma. She's based in Los Angeles. She teaches classes, retreats, and does individual mentoring. She's taught mindfulness at recovery centers, has co-facilitated Year to Live programs since 2008, and has had a weekly Dharma class for over a decade. And that is some serious dedication, Mary. Thank you. She was also the director of the Stream Against the Stream Buddhist Meditation Society for 10 years, and she completed the Buddhist chaplaincy program at the Sati Center and served as a volunteer chaplain at Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center. She also served as executive director of the Mind Body Awareness Project from 2016 to 2018. In taking the practice off the cushion, Mary's honored to serve on the board of CLUE, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. Along with teaching, she continues to investigate what it means with an undefended heart. She's committed to relevancy in her teaching and talks often on social justice issues, and currently co-facilitates a Women in Whiteness group. Mary has a master's degree from UCLA and also worked as an archaeologist in Syria. And of course, you can find more information on Mary's websites, marystankovich.org and meditationcoalition.org. So without further ado, such a treat to have you here, Mary. Welcome. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate that. I'm always, I listen to people introduce me and I go, what? I need to edit that down. That's like way too much stuff. But anyway, what a treat to be with you. I've been doing this academy for years now. I think 4th or 5th year. I'm not even sure how long it's been going, but it's an honor to be invited back every year. And what a delight to see so many people here. It's lovely. And I was really interested, all the folks who put in where they're calling in from. We're international this afternoon, this evening, whatever time of day it is where you are. So welcome everyone. I'm happy to be here with you. So what I want to do, and Robin alluded to this, is we'll have a bit of a meditation and then a talk, and then I'm going to do another little bit of a meditation, which will kind of encompass what I spoke about, what I'm going to speak about in my talk. So we'll have a short meditation and a talk and a little bit longer meditation, and then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So, without further ado, let's just sit for a bit. We're just going to sit for a few minutes just to arrive fully here. So take a couple of minutes to just settle in. Just relax the body if you can, softening around your shoulders, softening the belly, and let yourself just drop into the moment. Sometimes it's helpful if you take an inhale and then just exhale and drop into the body, making that conscious letting go. So an inhale, another exhale, just dropping in. We always like to remind folks as they move into a practice period that they cannot make a mistake in doing this. And it's really about being gentle with yourself. There's no judgment, there's no criticism, there's simply a practice of the in-breath and the out-breath, watching the thoughts go by, or being with what's happening right now. So as you settle in, see if you can put aside your thoughts, your plans, your memories, and just come into this moment. Remembering there's nowhere else to be but right here. So allow yourself to be fully present. Letting yourself attune to the sensations in the body. Maybe noticing some tingling or throbbing that you often miss because of the chatter of the mind. Perhaps you notice whether it's cool or warm. Perhaps you are aware of the movement of the chest as you inhale and exhale. Perhaps the belly also moves. Maybe you notice the rib cage of the shoulders moving in rhythm with the breath, this natural breathing. It just happens. It's always here for you to connect with. A place to return if the mind gets distracted. So welcome back, everyone. Glad again to see you all here. And I wanted to talk about spaciousness. This is something that came up for me a few weeks ago. I was reflecting on that. I hear the word a lot in different Dharma talks and different instructions from teachers. And as Robin mentioned, I do a weekly Dharma class. I've been doing it for over 12 years now. And it just actually, for the last couple of years, I've been doing 2 Dharma classes a week, and luckily could just move right over into Zoom. And so that's what I wanted to talk about a couple of weeks ago. And it was right when Robin said, what was I going to offer today? And so it's really something that I had never looked into. And when I first heard the word spaciousness, I didn't actually know what it meant. And I started looking into the suttas to see what they say about it. And they say nothing about the word spaciousness. Perhaps there's a word that means that, but it's not translated as that. But what I did find was the other side of spaciousness, which is constricted and tightness and hunched over and holding on and clinging. There's a whole lot about that, and I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar with that. I sure understand what it means when they talk about constriction and tightness and clinging. But I do now. I don't know if I did before I started practicing. I think I may have walked around constricted all the time. And sometimes when you walk around feeling constricted all the time, you don't realize you're constricted because you don't have anything to judge or compare it to. And so when I came to practice and started sitting and started opening up and started making some space, it's like when you're constantly caught up in the thinking mind, and all of a sudden you recognize you can let go of that thinking mind. It's like, sometimes for the first time you can take a breath. And so I started looking at what people would say about being constricted, because that was a real big part of my experience. Since I'm practicing, I experienced spaciousness, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But I wanted to look into this. And Christina Feldman is a teacher, and she says that contraction, constriction, this clinging, this tightness is a habit of mind. And because it's a habit of mind, there is a limitless, there's limitless opportunity for practicing constriction, for being preoccupied or worried or caught up in fear, and caught up in the future, and caught up in the past, and caught up in this conditioned habits that we may not even be aware of. And so it's the opportunity to be caught up in this is amazing. We get caught in craving, we get caught in aversion, and it takes us, it ties us up. It ties us up in knots. And we get caught up in our stories and our habits and our patterns. In fact, when I originally thought about this class, I thought I'd talk about the habits of the mind and the patterns, because we just get lost there and they run our lives if we're not paying attention. But then I noticed that Martine Batchelor taught at this academy I think in the spring, and she talked about habits of the mind. And I give props to her because she wrote a book called Let Go, which is a really excellent book. And it talks about the habits of the mind and the patterns of the mind. So if you've not checked that out, I recommend that highly. So she probably talked about it. And we hold tight to so many things because we are so gripped by fear of what if we don't have this particular thing, then what? And it's driven by causes and conditions. You know, we're all conditioned beings. We all have lives that we've lived. We've all been impacted by the world in some way, shape, or form, either by our families or by culture, by race, ethnicity, gender, religion, all kinds of things impact us. And then the societal constructs, and then the familial constructs, like we're told it's not okay to be angry, or it's not okay to do this, or it's you can only do this. And so we come up with all these rules that we that we fashion into how we see the world and how we think the world needs to be. In neuroscience, they talk about those types of things as implicit memories. We have these things we've heard, these things we've learned and been taught, and experiences we've had, and we kind of push them down so they're not easily or readily accessible to our mind, as opposed to explicit memories like what's your address or where'd you go to school. Those things are easy to access, but these ones that we've pushed down because probably they've been very uncomfortable, but they color our outlook on life. They color how we see the world. They say this is okay and that's not okay. And if my life doesn't look like this, then I'm going to be in trouble. Like I grew up in a family where it wasn't okay to make mistakes. So I grew up with this outlook that I was a perfectionist. I had to be perfect. That was my internal idea. And I walked around like so constricted, because who can be perfect? I failed every day at perfection. I would get a little bit, do something well, and then I wouldn't do something perfect. Or if I did something well in my mind, there was the idea that came in. It's like, well, it's not quite good enough. It's not quite good enough. There's something else. I'm sure there's something else. So that's that pattern of thinking that it's supposed to look like this. We get caught up in fixed ideas. And we take birth as people who need particular things. Like we see a shiny object and it's like, I need that. We take birth, we create a persona, and we kind of latch onto it and cling. And if it doesn't work out the way we want, there's this incredible letdown. And oftentimes in recovery, and I've been sober for 34 and a half years. It's quite mind-boggling, actually, when I think about it. But that was how I eased that pretzel. I decided it was a pretzel I had in my gut. And it wasn't until I got into recovery, and my recovery started, my spiritual practice and my recovery kind of went together. And it wasn't until I was in recovery and moving into my spiritual practice that I was able to identify that. As I said before, it was the way I lived my life. And we feel burned out, and we feel pulled in a million different directions. And we have so many things to deal with internally and externally. And especially right now, our world right now, we're experiencing a global pandemic. We're experiencing a lot of upheaval. For those of us in the United States, there's a lot of stuff flying around, which can, if you get sucked into it, it can be really a place of constriction, of tightness. And I watched myself a few weeks ago. I just kind of stepped back from social media for a few days intentionally, because I felt like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I just pulled back. And then every once in a while, I would put my foot back in, and I would be calm. And then I'd get caught up in reading stuff, and I could feel the tightness just rising in my belly. I just felt it. And because I have some experience feeling spacious, I could recognize that tightness. And so the invitation is to begin to recognize that tightness, begin to recognize where you're cut up, and create a bigger space, create a space where you can begin to hold it all. As Larry Yang is a teacher, and he talks about having a larger landscape, because when we're so focused on needing a particular thing, it's really difficult to move through the world, because we're only focused on that one thing. And if we don't get that one thing, I don't know, I run away from home, or I drink a quart of vodka, or I do this, that, or the other. And instead, what we're invited to do is recognize that that thing that we think we need is just a story. It's just a fantasy that's based on perhaps something that happened on our lives, but we can learn to let it go. One of these books behind me is a book called by Ajahn, a collection of Ajahn Chah's teachings, because Food for the Heart, I think it is. And it's a nice thick book. And when I read it and I finished it, I said, it's just about letting go. And the Buddha said to cling is to suffer. So if we suffer when we cling, you would think don't suffer when we don't cling. And that's been my experience. And so what we have to do is recognize where we cling. We cling when we believe the stories about tomorrow, or we cling when we're believing the story about yesterday. When I am in my contraction, I think the world is very small. And I actually, when we start moving into spaciousness and we start practicing mindfulness, when you start practicing mindfulness, and I'm going to assume most of the folks in this room have practiced mindfulness, that's why you're here. It's Buddhist, and there's meditation. Mindfulness is the foundation of it. The invitation in mindfulness is to step back from getting caught up in the senses, getting caught up in the thinking, getting caught up in everything that goes by in your mind, and taking a step back and creating some space. That's the first step to having some spaciousness, is to see you don't have to go along for the ride every time the thought thinks of something. Every time the mind thinks of something, every time an idea comes in, you don't have to follow it along. Used to be, I didn't know there was anything but what was going on in my mind. And it was triggering so much of the time, but not recognizing it. So when you begin to create spaciousness, you begin to see that there's a much larger landscape. There's a much larger world. I say that I used to have a pea brain. Not that I wasn't intelligent or smart or anything, but my worldview was just there. My worldview was this big. And I had particular ideas based on my conditioning, based on the messages I received growing up, the experiences I had, and the way I interpreted those things. Because I will interpret something very far away from what the intent was. Like, you can say something. I actually am also, or I have been, a mind reader and a fortune teller. So you can say something, but I will know what you really mean. And it's never nice and never helpful. So I had to recognize that, because that's the pea brain stuffing reality into my world. And I would fight reality. I'd like to say we get into a fist fight with reality, because we have this idea, this very small idea of what the world looks like and how it's supposed to turn out. And when it doesn't, it's painful. And when I have something that doesn't match it, I disagree with it. Like, if I want a job and I don't get the job, it's like so painful, because I needed that to be okay. I will not be okay unless I get what I think I need in this list of things that I think are important, this story that I believe about myself. And, I talked in one of the Dharma talks I gave recently, I talked about these habits of mind and these patterns where we get into being judgmental and critical. And so when we're sitting with mindfulness, this practice of mindfulness, we begin to recognize, oh, that's a critical voice. That's a judgmental voice. Can I let that go about ourselves and about others? Can we let go of that criticism and just be with the experience that's right here? This is the difficult part of it, because our escape into the future, our escape into the past, our escape into addiction, whatever our addiction is, drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, sex, food, video, social media, whatever spiritual practice can be an addiction. We can chalk up how many retreats, how many hours we sit, anything. We are very competent. We can create addiction out of anything. So our minds move into this place of trying to mitigate the discomfort. So if I have an idea that that job is what I need, or that relationship, or that color, or that sandwich, or whatever it is, and I don't get it, the mind will go into my habitual pattern of criticizing. You're not good enough. You're never going to amount to anything. Or I can move into blaming. they're jerks, they're assholes, they don't know, whatever. Instead of, the invitation is to turn towards our experience and be with the discomfort. Because when we're in blaming, we're feeling the tension, we're feeling the constriction of the suffering, of the pain, the grief, the loss, the sadness. We're feeling it, but we're doing everything in our power not to feel it. It's their fault. It's my fault. And we replay scenarios from 2 days ago. I got angry the other night and because somebody parked in front of my house and moved my garbage cans on garbage night. And I was like, and I was fully justified. I didn't yell loudly, but I let them know how I felt. And it was over in like less than a minute, but I carried that around with me for a day and a half. And I could feel my belly constricted. And I'm like, wow, look at this. Look at this. Because I got caught up in the story of you're not supposed to. Instead of going, okay, this is the way it is. Can I have a conversation with this person that isn't, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and come back from that and tend to the discomfort. I didn't want to feel the discomfort. And it's true so much of the time. You know, we all have stories, and one of the things I think is really important in finding our story is an ability to distance ourselves from it. You know, so I had this list of stories that I could think of for me and that other people told me that were their stories that we fall back on over and over and over again. The details may be different, but the underlying story is the same. We're inadequate. We're just not good enough. We're afraid we won't get what we want. We're unlovable. We're always on the outside looking in. You know, these things that are so painful that we carry around with us that we don't want to feel, but we tighten up against anything that sends us into that story. I didn't get invited to a party. All of my friends got invited to a party. One more time, I'm on the outside looking in. So instead of turning towards and feeling that sense of sadness of being left out, that old story, I go into who are they, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of get into this fighting mode and constrict myself. I can't feel this uncomfortableness. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. Or one more time, I'm just not good enough. Whatever it is. So this invitation to practice is an invitation to slowing down, watching when that constriction comes up, and seeing if you can let it go. Because when we, not letting go necessarily of the feeling, but letting go of the constriction, letting go of the story. I was sitting this morning and I was really calm and at ease, and this story went by, or this thought went by, and it hung out for a second. I don't even remember what it was, and we're talking 2 hours ago. So, and I could feel the constriction start in my belly, and I let the thought go and tended to the constriction, and it kind of dissipated and moved back into space. Because I paid attention to it. I didn't need it to not be there. I didn't need to push it away. I said, it's okay, you're here. What is that? I think it was sadness or something. I don't even remember. It was like gone in just a few moments. But I was really aware of that. It's like when I dipped my toe into social media. Once you begin to be aware of what it feels like to be constricted, you begin to recognize it. And that's a clue to turn back towards and feel. Can I let go of the story? Because the story is the future or the past. That guy that I got angry with that the other night, hours later, I was replaying the conversation in my head and coming up with better lines. Because if I had said this, then I have conversations with people who are nowhere near me all the time. But it's only because I can't be with what's here. So what you do in practice is begin to recognize the stories, begin to recognize how you react, and be willing to let go, because this is a lot about willingness. There's a tremendous amount of willingness in this practice, because um, we are fond of our stories. We are dedicated to our stories. Who would we be without our stories? Even if they hurt, even if we don't like them, what else do we have? So this can be a very, a very scary process to begin walking towards letting go of the story. Because even, sometimes when we're constricted and we're tight and we're hunched, I mean, physically we feel that way in our gut, and our shoulders are hunched, our hands are clenched, our jaws are tight. We begin to recognize that. It's a comfortable place because it feels so protective. So what will happen if we let go, if we open up? We're a target. We're this big target with, a bullseye on our chest. But the invitation is to do it slowly and be willing to let go of the story, let go of the future, let go of the past, and tend to the sensation that's right here with gentleness and kindness. We begin to relax into the moment, letting the shoulders relax, letting the belly relax. There's in the Year to Live practice, there's a meditation called soft belly meditation, where we begin to breathe intentionally into our bellies. And that was one of the most difficult practices I've ever done, because I don't think we realize how tight and how much we hold in our bellies. We just keep everything down there, just stuff it down, stuff it down, stuff it down. It's not even conscious a lot of the time. It's just automatic reaction. We just reactively stuff. So this is, and then it gets tight and it gets packed. And the invitation is to stop that and begin to soften, begin to let go, begin to relax the belly. So we relax both our bodies and we relax how we see things. We relax the mind. We're willing to let go of what we think it's supposed to be and instead tend to what's actually here. And when you can bring your attention to what's here, you do create that space. And we'll do a little practice in a bit where you can see where you're caught up with the mind and then just let go and come back and tend to what that feels like. When you begin to relax into the moment and cultivate mindfulness, cultivate seeing clearly, you begin to open beyond the fearful constricted states with this willingness to open up, setting an intention to open up, making an effort. When you recognize you're caught up in tomorrow or yesterday or a story, that old tired storyline, you're willing to let go of it and turn towards what's right here. Our minds are so much more expansive than we think. You can let go. I let go of my pea brain. It was mind-boggling that I didn't have to be tied to my view of the world, because my view of the world is skewed. I just made it up, and it changes all the time. So if it changes all the time based on where I live and who I talk to and what I'm reading and what I'm watching, how can it be the answer to all my problems if it shifts all the time? Because if I get the answer to this one, then I move over here and those people say, no, this is the answer. Then I have to move and develop that one. So you see that dependency on outside answers or outside situations is not where that ease, that equanimity is going to come from. It's all internal. It's really in that inside job that they talk about. So we make the effort to let go, and we make the effort to let our minds open up. It's this spaciousness, this spacious mindfulness practice shifts our perspective. We begin to see things differently. We don't already have the answer. We don't already know. because this practice is about curiosity. A lot of times when you're sitting, you can ask the question, what is this? What is this? Not what my head tells me is happening. You know, I used to where I used to teach, there was an air conditioner, and it would go click click every time it turned on, and every time I heard that click click, I'd go, oh God, I hate this air conditioner. It's going to make me so cold, because it blew right on the teacher, and I don't like having cold air blow on me. And so I'm leading a meditation. I'm going, just relax, la la la, and in my head I'm going, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. And then I said, maybe you should stop. And that was a really constricted thing. Maybe, Mary, just stop for a moment and pay attention to what's actually happening. What is this? And it's like, oh, actually, I'm not cold. I'm not freezing. My head said, hear that noise? This is what's going to happen. Prefab, preordained experience. And then I said, oh, maybe what's reality? What is this? Reality was totally different. So I shifted my perspective into reality and saying, just because I hear that sound, it doesn't always mean X, Y, Z. And so to let go of that, it's really quite extraordinary when you see it, and see it with simple things like that. It's not always about big, deep issues. Sometimes it's easier to get into these little preconceived ideas. Can you let go of those preconceived ideas? There's so much more freedom there. Rick Hansen, who I really admire as a teacher, he says when we're able to let go and move into this spaciousness, we're relaxed, we're alert, we're peaceful. It's a place of refuge because we don't have to fight against anything. We have this sense of equanimity where we're able to open to everything that shows up. It's really okay. There's a sense of ease. Jack Kornfield, when he talks about spaciousness, he says there's well-being, there's joy, there's clarity, there's wisdom, there's confidence. You know, we just let thoughts be thoughts, let sounds be sounds. We don't have to define. We just tend to what's right here. We make the space for our emotions for perhaps the first time in our world. It's like the autopilot response. If something negative or unpleasant happens and we're caught in addiction, the autopilot may be to go towards that, taking care of that. But if we can pause and tend to what's right here, perhaps we can shift the perspective and recognize maybe that's not where the direction we need to go in. I don't always have to think I'm unwanted and unlovable and I'll just leave before they throw me out. Because that's what I would do too. It's like, I'm going to check out before you have the chance to tell me to get out. So I would save myself, but be so lonely and isolated. And what this practice allows us to do is develop more connection. When we begin to have more compassion for ourselves and empathy for ourselves, because we make space for what's inside, those deep, deep, deep fears, that deep grief, that deep sorrow, the deep joy. Sometimes we're afraid of joy and happiness. Excuse me. When we can make space for what's here, it's transformative. It's absolutely transformative. And we don't have to be afraid of what shows up because we know how to hold it with kindness and compassion. And as we develop that compassion for ourselves, we're more compassionate with others. When we're able to be vulnerable, Brene Brown talks about vulnerability as the ability to be with discomfort. Because so much of our thinking, so much of our actions is about getting rid of discomfort. Whereas this practice is, why don't you learn how to be with discomfort? It's not necessarily as bad as your head tells you it is. I have found in doing this that the things I was most afraid of, they're never as bad as I think they're going to be. My fear of what it's going to feel like is much worse than what it actually feels like. Much worse. Much worse. So I've been blathering on for quite a bit. So I just want to do a quick couple of minutes meditation, and then you'll be able to see hopefully get a little flavor of what this is like, and then you can continue in your own practice. So, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So just settle back in, finding your seat, letting your eyes close, and check in with what's present right now. Sometimes it's helpful to do a little bit of checking in with the body and intentionally relaxing. Sometimes we find that our bodies are tense and we're not even aware of it. So soften around the eyes, soften around the jaw, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the arms, the hands. Relaxing the belly if you can. Relaxing the hips, the legs, the feet. And let yourself relax into the breath. And I invite you to let yourself rest here with the breath and the body. These are a solid foundation that can support you as you move into opening into mindfulness and awareness. You're not stopping your thoughts, you're not stopping the other sensations, the sounds and the smells, but you're not necessarily engaging with them. You're letting them pass by as much as you can, as best you can. Noticing the state of your mind. It's so helpful and beneficial to notice the mind. If there's restlessness, if there's ease, if there's thoughts that are difficult, perhaps you notice a physical reaction, tightness in the belly or in the chest. Yeah. Hunching of the shoulders, a clenching of the wrists or the hands. Paying attention to the physical experience that's present, maybe as a reaction to the thinking mind. See if you can relax again, if you notice any tightening. If you find yourself caught up in a thought, maybe about the future or the past, again, pay attention to any physical response that arises around that as you bring yourself back to the present. Oftentimes, when we're lost in the future or the past, there's an agitation that's attendant to that. It's not wrong, it's not a mistake. It's simply a conditioned reaction. So pay attention as you move back to the present and let go, soften, relax. Maybe reconnecting with the breath. If you notice any emotions that are present in the body, any sensations, any such as grief or sadness, fear, joy, excitement. Again, bring your attention to what's actually present, not in the future, not in the past, but tend to what's right here. Maybe getting a sense of that in your body. This practice is about learning to connect with the reality of this moment. Not the story of the future or the past, but you tend to what's right here, right now. With gentleness, with kindness, with compassion. Perhaps making space for the very first time to be with gentleness. Recognizing that your experience doesn't have to be anything other than the way it is. Remembering that right now, it's like this. Right now, it's like this. Right now, it's like this. So bringing yourselves back. That was just a little taste of a way to begin to let go of the constriction around thoughts and agitation and restlessness. And I invite you to maybe take some time to practice that for a few moments on your own when we break, or another time, maybe your next sitting period. If you haven't already begun to practice that, it's really beneficial to learn to make space, to find that pause. So now I would like to open it up for questions. So Robin, are you gonna
Yes.
facilitate? Yeah.
Again, if you'd like to come live with a question or a comment or something to share of your experience, if you press the participant icon at the bottom of the screen, there is a button that says raise hand. I realize that there are enough people here that it's actually hard for me to see everybody's images. I found it very interesting because I usually try to begin the questions if there aren't any right away. And I found that in that meditation, I was so into letting go that I let go of the question, and it felt great. So thank you for that. That was really it was really quite a wonderful experience.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you.
So we, Jim, would you like to come? I can't. Let's see. Yes, I think you have your video on. Would you like to come on and ask a question? Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Jim. Thanks, Mary. Everything you've said has just been so right on to my experience, and really appreciate your teaching. Kind of funny, I was talking with a friend this morning. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mindful Self-Compassion program.
Yep.
And, there's something in there. There's a practice in that called the self-compassion break. And the first step of which is to say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. And I was saying to a friend of mine this morning that who's done the Mindful Self-Compassion course that it's a great practice, but I can almost never identify that this is a moment of suffering. Like it's like I'm suddenly on the, fifth garage floor, I just drop and I'm in the suffering, and I've lost that perspective of, oh, I'm suffering. And, I've practiced for a long time. So there's also this idea of like, I should be able to notice that I'm suffering. But it's a little bit like you with the car, and it's just, I get hooked, and just wondering how do I stop doing that?
Thank you. I think what's really helpful is to recognize there's no timeline for this, and it does take time, and you're probably a lot better at it than you used to be. And I always love asking folks in groups like this, how many of you think you should be further along than you are now? And I think it's like 99% of the people raise their hands, because we all have that idea, and to recognize that's a story too. That's a story too. And so recognize when you are suffering, but I think it's also helpful to recognize when you're not suffering. So when you're experiencing moments of joy, bring that into your awareness, so you have that lodged in your memory too. So there begins to become this separation between ease and joy and suffering. So the suffering becomes easier to identify. And if you identify your stories, I mean, literally like, oh, this is that on the outside looking in again. So the details don't matter, but the core remains the same. Then I have found that it's easier to move into that. And so I'm going to suffer. I'm going to suffer because I'm not enlightened yet. Oh, well, I'm not dead yet, so I can keep practicing. That's my time frame. Hopefully I'll get somewhere closer by the time I die. So, but until then, it's just like, okay, how do I mitigate this? So thanks so much, Jim. I also want to be, I told Robin I was really good at ending on time, and then I just kind of went, blah, 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 blah. And she said it was okay if we go over, but I also want to give you time if you need to do closing announcements. I'm happy to stay and chat and answer more questions. I just want to put that out there, whatever your time is.
No, I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We'll just continue.
Yeah. So thank you. If anyone else has a question or comment.
Jenny, would you like to come on? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mary. I really appreciated your sharing and the meditation. I'm new to this group, and I'm really appreciated the emphasis on the body. As a meditator, I learned to take a certain posture and follow the breath, and then kind of deal with what's going on in my thinking, and that emotions are very powerful, colorful thoughts, but they're just thoughts. And it's only been in the last 6 months that I've really come into attunement with my body and the messages that are coming through for me. And I've realized that where I'm hitting blockages, it really has to do with my addiction background. You know, even though I've been sober a little while and done a lot of work of different kinds. So if you have anything more to say about that sensation, and I missed the beginning of your talk, maybe you mentioned this, but the sensation of that constriction coming up. Because for me, it's normally in my solar plexus. That's where it is. I can feel other emotions and things in my body. And in the past, I've had a lot of tension in other parts of my body. But since I've been studying this, that's the place. And so I'm just interested to know more about other people's experience.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all do have different places where our different emotions show up. I knew a teacher who said that when he felt it in his tricep, he knew it was shame. I mean, he was that finely attuned. But for me, it's all the front of my torso, and it does come up in my belly, my solar plexus, my gut. My anger hangs out in my chest. I noticed that last year or a couple of years ago, that it just kind of lives here. So as you attune more to the body, you begin to recognize, and I think just paying attention to that, it's so important. You know, the first foundation of mindfulness is body, breath, and body awareness, because as that book says, the body keeps the score. Exactly. Somebody just posted somatic experiencing. It's a nonverbal way to connect with the body. The body, he keeps so much trauma is in the body. Trauma is in the body. And the more we attune to it, the better it is. As I said at the beginning, that when I was in my addiction, I had no clue. I couldn't differentiate. I think I was cut off from the neck down. And the more my sobriety and my practice, I'm more attuned to when it's uncomfortable, what it feels like. Instead of just going, well, I think what happens is when it's uncomfortable, we just automatically try and fix it. But as we begin to slow down and attune more to the body, we can see or feel when then those sensations come up. And a lot of times it's like, oh, screw it, I'm going to fix it anyway. And then as we become a little bit more, hopefully, we begin to say, oh, okay, I don't have to fix this. I could just tend to it. And it's so important to have that attunement, so that you're even at a certain point, you can be talking to someone. And that's why I said when I did the social media, I could feel it starting to rise, the tension, the anxiety starting to show up. And I just backed away because I didn't need to have that in my life because it was unnecessary. So I hope that was helpful. But
Thank you.
pay attention to the body. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I
Would
have
anybody?
Yeah, I have a question or comment that you might be able to expound on a little bit. So, you know, during isolation, it's a little easier to flow with the stories we tell ourselves because there's less people around. Sometimes it helps me, which is why I come to the Sangha and other things so that I can say those things out loud and we can share our stories and laugh about it, or somebody else will tell something about it. And you realize, you know, what we're doing to ourselves. And for example, we were reading, I'm in this recovery, Buddhist recovery group, and we read books written, you know, about the 12 steps in Buddhist practices and where the parallel path there. And the one we just started reading this week is very different from what we've read in the past, to the point where she's kind of like rewriting the steps a little bit and using different words. And I could feel my like visceral response, like, oh, you know, like my heart was beating and I was getting a little sweaty. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if I was alone, I would have probably put that book down and gone, oh, no. But because we're in a group, and the purpose of the group is to kind of share and explore and kind of also feel those feelings when they come up, like, that's weird. Why am I reacting literally so viscerally to this, new information or different information? So, having during the last 9 months of semi-isolation, it's a little easier to like hang on to those stories. And, how do you practice that when you're around people a little bit less than what we used to be?
Yeah, thank you for that, Monica. I think what helps me is a sticking to the in the precepts in Buddhism, there's the fifth precept, which is traditionally watch no taking of intoxicants which lead to heedlessness. But Thich Nhat Hanh he's expanded the precepts, and the fifth precept is watching what you ingest. And so it's not just what you take into your mouth, but watch everything you take in. And so be careful. And that includes the thinking mind. So it's to really make the effort to pay attention and watch so what am I reading? What am I hearing? What am I listening to? What am I thinking? As well as what am I eating? Am I eating, have I been eating just sugar for 9 months or what? Potato chips in my case. So watch what you ingest, and because watch what the reaction is, and that includes the mind. You have to be willing to give that much more effort, because you are alone, because you don't have the traditional feedback mechanisms that generally are there. And so to recognize this is a different circumstance, so I have to be a little bit more watchful in what I do take in. So just a recommitment to that precept, I think, would be beneficial. An intention to, I really pay attention. And so seeing the fact that, if I were reading this on my own, I probably would have thrown it across the room. That's fine, but then go and pick it up and continue to read it and be with the sensations. Tend to those sensations of whatever they are, name them. What is present? Is it anger? Is it annoyance? Is it criticism? Yeah, it's probably a lot of those. So yeah, thanks, Monica.
Do we have time for one more? Eric, would you like to come on?
Yes, thank you. First, I really appreciate the meditation and the lecture. Thanks a lot. I found a lot of peace through the meditation, and it helped me in my journey. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question though, and it's one that I struggle with as a person who comes from a lot of privilege, that when I think about what you said about needs, that, okay, I need this job or I need this thing. My needs, the feeling of need that I have can, in many cases, be dismissed and reevaluated and reframed. But there are people who have needs that are more atomic and more elemental than mine. And is the advice the same for someone who is struggling to find a place to live or a place or food, as someone who's in my position where it hurts my ego or my pride not to have certain things, but ultimately I'm fulfilling my basic needs. So I wanted to talk about privilege and the way that we dismiss our feelings of needs, or not dismiss them, accept them, acknowledge them, and try to see them for what they are. Is there differences in how a person in privilege handles that than other people? And thanks in advance.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Eric. I think, when you talk about we all have the need for shelter and food and health, and those things are not, things that should be dismissed, the need that you have for them. That's just like a basic human need. But I think what's important is to recognize that our experience and our feelings are legitimate. And what we can have a tendency to do is to dismiss our feelings because we judge, oh, I can't complain because, or how can I feel this way because X, Y, and Z? There's so much need in the world. And really what you have to do is tend to the feelings that are there. Recognize that, yeah, these are, you know, problems of privilege, let's say. However, the feeling is there. So let go of the story, because you're caught in a story when you're comparing different needs. That's a story, but tend to the feeling. The feeling is real. The mind doesn't differentiate. You know, sadness is sadness is sadness is sadness. Grief is grief is grief. Joy is joy is joy. It doesn't say one is better than another. What is it? Joseph Goldstein said, when there are no hierarchies of compassion, there are no hierarchies in this realm. It's to tend to what's present and to, you know, realize that we got caught trapped in a thing of, I need this shiny new object to make me happy. The story is not true. Tend to what's underneath it. This sense of lack, this sense of longing. That's a human emotion that needs to be held, that needs to be loved, that needs to be tended to, and not dismissed because you want a shiny object and somebody else doesn't have enough food to eat. I think that's a really important point, and hopefully I'm being clear around that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Just as a
Yeah.
follow-up,
Mhm.
for people who are facing more elemental or fundamental needs, is it reasonable for me to expect them to have the same distance when they're evaluating their feelings as I would have for myself?
You know, it feels to me like apples and oranges. That's
Yeah,
just my
yeah,
first take, because somebody's trying to find a place to live and food to eat, and you're in a different
right.
place. And so I think,
Yeah.
you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it feels the same way to me, and that's why that's
Okay.
that's why I love the practice
Yeah.
and am concerned about its application across different sets of needs. I really appreciate your patience with my questions and your
Yeah, no
time today.
worries.
It helped me with a lot of peace. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Great. I think we're at a good stopping place with
Yeah.
the questions. And just I want to thank you so much, Mary, for coming back to our community over and over again. You're such an important part of our family, and this teaching, this presentation of awareness, this practice of constrictedness and spaciousness, recognizing it in our body and our mind and how one affects the other. It's been, it's been tremendous. I think I forgot my role as a technical person while I was in this program today. So it was beautiful. Thank you. I think just to bring us back to the idea of generosity and how no true spiritual life is possible without a generous heart, and how generosity allies with this idea of abundance and the feeling that we're enough and that we have enough to share, and that part of what we can share is our recovery practice. So I'm going to put a few links into the chat field. One is your website again, just to let everyone know who doesn't know that you have meditation every morning, 7 days a week, from 7 to 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, which is a great gift to give yourself, to sit daily. And then you can check it out too for classes and whatever events you may have going on, Mary. So thank you. Also, the Donna link, I will put the Donna link in. I'm going to put the Facebook link and our website link for the Academy. I'm not sure who's teaching next month, but we have this teaching. We offer these Academy teachings the first Sunday of every month. And we will know shortly on our website and on the Facebook page who will be with us for the new year. So it's been beautiful to have you all here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your attention, and thanks for being part of our community. I'll leave the room open for another 5 or 10 minutes in case anyone needs to copy anything from the chat. And you can also reach out to us at academy@buddhistrecovery.org with any follow-up questions, or if you want to know more about us. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful week.